Hi, I'm Doug from Dynamic Computing, and welcome to episode 125 of 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast. Today, we're going to look at a piece of Amiga hardware that's not particularly common. A lot of us have heard about it, but there just aren't that many of them out there. And that is the Amiga A1020 5.25" drive right there. Now, I'll show you mine in a second. But in a nutshell, this was really made by Commodore to supplement their bridge boards like their 2088 and their 286 bridge boards, basically to be plugged into the back and give instant access to a 5.25" PC drive. And that works just fine. I've got an A2088 bridge board and I could plug my 5.25" into it. It'd be recognized as a drive, no issues at all. But this little beauty can also be used as an Amiga drive. But why? The standard Amiga drives, as we know, are 880K, which was really good for for 1985, 1986. That was fantastic storage. The Macs were still using a lot of 400K discs. Even the Atari ST was using a 400K or maybe a 720K disc. So 880K was a lot of storage. But there are some things that people might want to do to interchange data on 5.25" drives. Let's take a look at the little unit here. There's the little honey right there. You've got the original Amiga logo, and look how nicely it matches the 1010 drive, the Amiga 1010 drive for the Amiga 1000. It is a perfect little match for that. Now here's another curious thing about it. Take a look at our Commodore logo here, our little faceplate right down there, our little handle for popping the guy open, the lights, and oh my goodness, she looks exactly like a Commodore 1571 dual-sided 5.25" drive for the Commodore 128 and the Commodore 64, and that's because it's basically the same thing. They use the same mechanisms, the same drive, just a little bit different electronics, but the actual form factor, see the little two girls side by side? These things are exactly the same. There's a nice side view of it. Now I picked this up at AmiWest last year for a pretty good price. You see it has a standard connector for an Amiga floppy drive in the back. It even has a pass-through for putting another drive here. Standard kettle type connector, power switch, all pretty typical. But these are anything but typical drives. They can be formatted to handle a 440K Amiga disk, which is a really weird capacity, using standard double-sided, double-density disks like this. You do not need to notch out any of the sides because it will just automatically read both sides of the disk. So how does this little guy connect up to your Amiga? Well, let's take a look because it is not typical. Now you can see that I have an icon on my desktop. This says A1020 unreadable. And that's something that we're going to address. Now you just plug an A1020 drive into any of your Amigas, it is not going to show up on Workbench. You will under no circumstances be able to see the drive. Even if you go into a command prompt and you type info to look at your disks, under normal circumstances, you will not see an A1020 drive. And that is because the Amiga does not care a fig Newton about drives that do not have 80 cylinders. It does not try and auto mount them. It does not even know they exist. They have to be told to exist. So how do we tell them to exist? Well, we do it the old-fashioned way. In the devs folders, now this is assuming you're using Amiga 2.1 or above, this is 3.2.1. In the devs folder, there's a folder called DOSDRIVERS in here. And inside of DOSDRIVERS, what you're going to see are things like PC0, PC1, in case you're using a PC drive, or maybe CD0 or CD1 if you're using a CD drive. You can see some other instances of some standard DOS drivers under the storage folder, and then DOS drivers. You can see the aux, the RAD drive, Mac CD drive, CD0, all these different manually created disk types. Let's take a look at what those really are. We're going to open up the text editor that's built into Amiga OS 3.2. Let's zoom in a little bit closer here, get a little better view. And we're going to open up one of the existing ones. We're going to look under storage, we're going to look under DOS drivers, and let's just look at the PC0 drive. Now, what you've got in here is a file, a text file, telling the Amiga how to view a drive. So you've got a device, MFM device for an older style PC device. How many surfaces it has, how many sectors per track, low cylinder, high cylinder, that's for an 80 cylinder drive, like a typical drive. This tells the Amiga how to view a specific disk. And this is what we need to do for the A1020 drive. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new one. And now I already have, so let's take a look at it. Basically, you just open up your favorite text editor and you go into, let's see, it's devs, DOS drivers. We'll open the one I've already created. You go into your favorite text editor and you create a Mountlist file for it. What device is it using? Trackdisk.device, which is the traditional Amiga floppy controller. Unit 2. Now, I'm using Unit 2 in this case because this is an Amiga 3000. It views by default the internal floppy drive is DF0, and then it supports a second internal floppy drive, so that's automatically kind of reserved by the system as DF1. So if you plug an external floppy drive, an 880K, into an Amiga 3000, it will usually show up as DF2. All right, so in this case I'm using Unit 2 for the second device, the external device. If you plug this into an Amiga like a 500 or a 1000 or a 2000, you would have that set as unit equals 1 because it assumes all external drives are DF1. Hope that makes sense. Now here's the important thing. Flags equal 1, that tells it, yes, load the device even though it's not an 80 track device. Number of surfaces 2, BlocksPerTrack 11, reserve 2, low cylinder 0, high cylinder 39. That's saying it's a 40 cylinder device instead of the normal 80 cylinders. Now here buffers equal 20. That's the number of buffers it includes automatically. You can set that for what you want. Buff mem type, if you put 0, it'll create the buffers in chip RAM. Use 1, it should in theory create that for fast RAM. Now, so you create this Mountlist device. You can just edit one of the existing devices like PC0, delete what you don't need, add in what you want, and make sure you save that under devs, DOS drivers, okay? Just like this here. Now I have a hidden icon there. And then every time you boot your Amiga, it will virtually boot that or mount that device in the background. If you don't want to have it automatically mounted, you could save that under storage, DOS drivers. You can save it there. And then every time you want to mount it, then you have to go into a command prompt and type mount A1020. Now in this case, it'll say it's already mounted. You'd have to do that every single time you want to turn your Amiga on. Now, why is this called A1020 and not DF2? That's because it's not a normal drive that the Amiga is going to recognize, so it does not automatically create a name like DF0 or RAM. You can call this literally anything you want. You can call it DF2. just rename this file DF2. You can call it Bugaboo Bear. It doesn't care. The Amiga is so smart, it doesn't care what your units are called. It just addresses them by whatever name you give them. If you want to make it easy and just call it DF2, feel free, no problem at all. Now notice on a totally fresh boot, it does not see the drive at all. It doesn't even care that the drive exists at all. And that's because the Amiga OS, again, does not really recognize it as a standard floppy drive. If you want to see it, go into a command prompt. Even here we can type info. It doesn't care about A1020. But if you type in A1020 : it's going to light up the drive light, which it's doing down below, and it's going to try and read the drive, and there it says A1020 unreadable. Now we can do things with it. Now, the first time you use the drive, you can go into your system folder, you can go into your format utility, which we don't use a lot. Usually we just format what's on the drive, on the screen, and you will see the A1020 drive when you go into the format utility. It says 440K capacity, A1020. You can click on it, click continue. We don't want a trash can. Let's give it a name, and we're going to call this Amiga 525 just for laughs. Now, quick format is highlighted because I've tried to format this disk before, but normally when you first put a blank disk in, only the format option will be available. Click format, and it goes ahead and it tries to format it as a full 440K drive. And down here, you'll see that the A1020 is spinning away, chugging away, trying to format the disk as a 440 kilobyte disk. We'll give that a second to finish, and we will see it fail miserably. Now the performance is actually pretty good on a 1020 drive. The actual drive speed is great, just like it is on a 1571 drive. So it formats pretty quickly, and now it will come back and it will give me the error that it gives me every time. And that's because I think that the heads are dirty on this. So we're gonna pop this guy open and see if we can clean it up. Yep, seek failure. I've tried about 5 different disks. Let's go ahead and pop the drive open and see if we can fix that issue. Here's the bottom of the drive. We've got Amiga external 5¼ inch disk drive, serial number 1106697. So it's actually probably about the 6,697th of these drives. They built quite a few. They just have standard Phillips heads right here. I'm going to go ahead and take it apart, and we're going to look inside. Now, once we get the top off, you can see it's fairly complicated in here. Here's the actual drive mechanism itself. Again, it should be about the same mechanism used in a 1571. And then here, we've got a pretty hefty power supply, and it probably also has some electronics controls under here. Now, we're not going to need, hopefully, to get inside of here because she powers up just beautifully. But we're going to have to take off some screws here, and we're going to have to get this top off and probably this front cover removed, just like we do on a 1571 drive, to get inside here and actually clean it up inside. Now we've got the front cover off, which is great. We've got a little LED that comes over here to our little LED lights. That's great. But look how they trick us. There's one screw right here that needs to be removed to take this top cover off. But look, the power supply has this completely unnecessary piece of metal going across that screws down, and there's another screw buried deep in here that I have to unscrew to get this top cover off, which means I have to take the cover of the power supply off. A couple screws here, a couple screws there. Just be aware if you have to do it that it's a little trickier than you might suspect. Let's go ahead and get those off. Now with the power supply cover off, you can see a little bit about the power supply in there. Nothing particularly tricky. Here's a control board, plugs into a standard one of the ribbon style 5¼ connectors. There's the screw we had to take off to get the whole top cover off. And you can see it's a pretty standard 1571 looking mechanism here. But what we want to do is clean the heads and lubricate the rails. Let's get started. look how Commodore wants to be a pest. This metal plate is right over the read-write heads. Normally on a 1541 or a 1571 drive, this plate would not be here. You'd have instant access to the heads under here in order to clean them, which is something you want to do periodically. You know, this drive's 35, 40 years old, so we want to clean it. I'm going to have to remove a couple of screws here and a screw over here to get this plate off to even access the heads and the rails. So yeah, they really are making this more difficult than it should be, but it's not a problem. So we had one screw here, one screw here. I had to pry up the little bars on the side here that were holding these cables in. Just use a little tool, just pry them up and pull these cables out so you can get to the screws because they're covered pretty tightly. And then one screw back here, and then this slides out and reveals our heads right there. So that's what I want to clean. Now what I usually use to clean heads is just some nice Q-tips, as we call them, or cotton buds as they're called in other places, and a little 90% isopropyl alcohol. I'm spraying the Q-tip itself, and we'll get in there and give it a little scrub down. And Commodore actually recommended doing this quite a bit back in the day. If you were having problems reading your disk, just go ahead and clean the heads. So it's strange why they made them so difficult to do here. Now remember, unlike a 1541 drive, these drives have two heads, one at the top and one at the bottom. So you don't only need to clean the bottom one, you also need to get up there and give the top one a little cleaning too. So we've got the heads cleaned on here, and I thought, you know, I'm going to just take a look at how this reacts once I get the heads cleaned. Here's the head right here. Now we've got our floppy disk in here, and we've got our Amiga 3000 turned on. Now watch what we do. We're going to select our 1020. We're just going to format it, call it empty, and tell it to format the drive. And it makes all kinds of cool noises like it's formatting. The progress bar goes up, but look what happens to our disk. That's formatting, the head is spinning, the head is not moving. It's formatting the same sector over and over because this entire head assembly is supposed to be chunking forward as it goes through the different 40 sectors. It ain't doing nothing. That's one of two things. It just means it's either stuck and I have to unstick it and lubricate it, or it means that the stepper motor itself is dead. Now, the stepper motor right here is ice cold. So I'm worried that this stepper motor might be dead, but maybe I'll be able to take one of my broken 1571s and grab a motor out of there. Now, you do not want to try and move it by the head here. That's very delicate. But by the back, there's a little plastic piece. This was very, very chunky and tight. It took me a good pull to get that broken free. Now it moves fairly freely. Now I'm still going to lubricate the rails, but now we have the actual head mechanism moving back and forth manually where it would not before. It was stuck good. So we're going to turn it on and we're going to try reformatting a disk again, and we're going to see what happens. And watch this. We go to format. Look at that. The little head's moving back and forth. It was not doing that before. Stepper motor is fine. It was a lubrication issue. So we're going to tell it to format the disk. Ba-ding-a-ding. And again, I have not lubricated this yet. I still want to do that. $440K, empty's fine. Format. Now, look at that little head moving forward. That is exactly what it's supposed to be doing and exactly what it was not doing before. Now, it gave me an error. That's fine. That is certainly more than it was doing before because it was actually moving the head. I'm going to do some lubricating and some cleaning, and we're going to see if we can get it working. Okay, yeah. Let's not tell anyone. This will be our own little secret. but when I got the could not format cylinder 0 error a minute ago on here, yeah, maybe it's because I forgot to put a floppy back in the disk drive after I unstuck the head. So let's try this again, but this time with an actual disk in the drive, and we'll just pretend that that never happened. I'll give it a second here to register the disk. Now it's spinning the disk. Nope, still giving me an error, but at least this time there's a disk in the drive. This time I swapped to a different disk, and it's doing much better formatting the disk. And it should be done in just a second, and we'll see if it gives us the seek error or if it actually formats a disk. Doing its thing. Couldn't format cylinder 39. That's okay. I mean, a lot of the disks that I have are actually bad. I bought a whole pack of maybe 15 or 20 5¼ inch disks, and I found a ton of them bad. I'm going to try a few and see if we can get any to format. Well, what have we here? We've got a new icon on the desktop called Empty, and it says 417 kilobytes free, 976 bytes in use. Let's do a quick little info here. A1020, it says 0 errors. We'll see. Let's copy something to it. And since we were working in our storage folder here, let's go ahead and copy all the DOS drivers over to it. Just see what happens. See if it explodes. Copying, copying. Drive is clicking away. Space is going down. Oh my goodness. Look at this. We have our DOS drivers in our A1020 drive. This is cool. So let's do dir A1020 DOS drivers. Whoops. A1020. I didn't actually go to the drive. There we go. CD DOS drivers. And there they are. I'm gonna run ed aux. Brings up the file from the disk. Let's see. Just fine. Perfect. That is too cool. And so now we have a functioning A1020 drive with 440 kilobyte capacity that appears to be working on the Amiga 3000. Now, when you swap disks, you can't just take a floppy out of the A1020, put another one in, and you're golden. You have to do one of two things. Now here in the command prompt, it's disk change A1020, and that forces it to read whatever new disk is put in the A1020, and it would update on the workbench the new name if we had a different disk name in there. It does not do it automatically because it's not automatically trying to read the disk every second or so like a regular 3.5 floppy would do. Now what I'm curious about is if with Amiga OS 3.2.1 it does the same thing by clicking on empty and telling it eject disk, if that sends it the same signal. I'm going to look and I'm going to see. No, it does not seem to be sending any signal to the drive at all, so you probably do have to go into the disk change. Let's go ahead and rename this something besides empty. Rename Amiga 525. And now it's renamed. Fantastic. Look at that, guys, it works. So what am I going to do with this fully functional, but not yet put back together, A1020 drive? probably just use it to add to my collection of cool things that I have. I will probably put my A2088 Bridgeboard back in my Amiga 3000 here, which was its original home years ago when I had the 386 Bridgeboard. But obviously a 5 1/4 inch floppy drive is not going to fit inside an Amiga 3000. So using the A1020 as an external drive for the PC side of things is really what it was designed for, and probably what I'll use it for. Will I ever really use it on the Amiga side of things? No. 440 kilobyte storage on the 5 1/4, yeah, there's not going to be any advantage for me. Now, you can also create a mount list for this very easily to have that drive show up as a PC drive on the Amiga side of things. Amiga 3.2 has the drivers built in to read PC disks. Just a matter of editing that little script under DOSDRIVERS to more reflect what it would look like as a PC drive. It'll read PC disks just fine, no problem at all. So you want to interchange files on your Amiga with an old PC, this disk will do the thing for you. It's just a cool thing to add to my collection, and I'm glad that I have it. Now, I know I'm going to get a message from Sven Pook, my good friend, saying, Doug, please, please, please send me over that drive. I've been looking for one for years. Sorry, buddy, but I promise I am keeping an eye out for one of these drives for you. I got you in mind, pal. Thank you to all of my wonderful patrons. You guys are fantastic. You help keep me going. Here's a list of my patrons. If you want to join the list, just please feel free to stop by Tenmark patron account at patreon.com/Tenmark, and for as little as $2 a month, you're on the list. Now, what's this that it's scrolling across here? Could it be the secret announcement for the 2022 Amiga Art Contest with some artwork created by this year's awesome co-host, Kevin Saunders? Maybe. Stay tuned. Thank you for joining me today on this exploration of the Amiga 1020 drive. I'm so glad we got the thing working. I don't do a lot of these videos where I actually fix something right there in front of you, but I'm glad we did this. Please follow me on the social medias. All the links are in the description. Also, the code that you need for both Amiga OS 1.3 and 2.1 and above for creating a mount list will be right in the description today. So just go ahead and copy and paste it right from there. But until next time, this is Doug from 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast, off to find more 5 1/4 inch discs that actually work.